So Harry Potter is a thing, and everyone watching just gave me a big no duh. Harry Potter is one of the biggest selling books worldwide, and the film series started a huge trend in adapting books into big franchises worth millions of dollars. There's even a new spin-off series with the Fantastic Beasts movies. So yes, I know you know Harry Potter is a thing. But things were not always that way. Before a whole generation became inspired to read, before the video games and audiobooks narrated by Stephen Fry, before the fame of Emma Watson, there had to be a beginning. A beginning that set up the plot lines for the story as well as the characters and their possible development arcs. Something to set up great subplots, to make the world feel real and lived in, and most importantly, something to create the magic and rules of the world. And all of that started in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. So today I want to talk about Harry Potter. I love Harry Potter. I struggled with learning how to read when I was younger, and one of the biggest reasons I did learn how to read was because my mom would only read so many chapters of Harry Potter to me each night. It was too slow and I needed more. I now know what she was up to, tricking me into becoming interested in reading on my own. I hate being manipulated, but it worked. There! Are you happy, Mom? I turned 11 just before the 5th book came out, and I remember the excruciating wait for the Order of the Phoenix. Then, when I was in middle school, The Half-Blood Prince was released. And finally, I was in high school before the final book came out. I think I actually remember my mom getting mad at me while I was reading the 6th book. She said I should invite friends over and that I wasn't allowed to spend all my time reading. Make up your mind, Mom. First you wanted me to read, and now you don't? You did this to me! Interspersed throughout the book releases came the films. I saw the first 4 in theaters, and I can actually remember my mom taking me out of school one afternoon to watch The Chamber of Secrets, which she did not enjoy because my mother hates snakes. To this day, I am still a huge Harry Potter fan. Like I said in the My Little Pony video, I don't really own a lot of merchandise or paraphernalia per se, but my friends and I will argue about ownership philosophy like that of John Locke in regards to how goblins view ownership, or the properties and applications or limitations of Gamp's 5 laws of elemental transfiguration. Yeah, we like our shit good and nerdy. This natural draw towards understanding the rules of fantasy is where I derive a lot of joy and where a lot of my joy from Harry Potter comes from. I think this series does this particularly well. Harry himself understands and exploits these rules in regards to wand lore in order to defeat Voldemort. But it is my love for this hard magic system that also puts me in a very strange place in regards to the Harry Potter films. In the final year of my undergrad, I did a marathon of all 8 movies with some other super friends and some friends we were trying to introduce to the wonders of Harry Potter. But I found that the would-be fans kept asking questions about why things or characters would do certain things that way, and I found myself explaining a lot of what happened in the books rather than just watching and enjoying the movie. Eventually, 3 or 4 movies in and a lot of exposition from both me and Hermione, I just settled on the phrase, let's assume that anything that doesn't make sense is explained in the books. What I took away from this was that there was a lack of consistency in the adaptation of the book to the film, and it had affected the story. And there are still even issues of consistency from film to film. You can't use magic outside of school. That is literally one of the biggest plot points of the movie preceding this one. And it's the reason you're about to get kicked out of the house literally 5 minutes from now. Ah! So the films are weird for me. I think that they are incredible testaments to filmmaking and acting, and they do a magnificent job of creating the visual identity of the books. In a lot of cases, the way that the movie shows magic or depicts a character is exactly how I imagined it would be in my head. It's wondrous. But on the other hand, where the fuck Peeves at? The films are weird, and really only work if you have read the books. And I can come to grips with that. They are what they are. So Harry Potter needs a beginning. Something to set up the whole story. And I think there is one scene in both book and movie that sets up the rules of the world and a lot of the characters more than any other scene. And it's not that one. And it's not that one. And it's definitely not this one. The scene that is the most important for pretending how the logic of magic works is in the Hogwarts Express. So, spoilers for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which is a 19-year-old movie and a 23-year-old book. And some spoilers for the other books, too. After boarding the Hogwarts Express and having already met the Weasley family, a scene that plays out way funnier in the book than in the movie, exploding toilets, Harry winds up sitting in a compartment with Ron. The two of them talk, and we see the beginning of a camaraderie, if not a full friendship. The two of them share food, and we see that wizards have their own brands of candy and other food-related things. This includes chocolate frogs and their associated cards. Ron then talks about his family and all the hand-me-downs he has, which leads him to talk about Scabbers, his pet rat, and his brother's wand. He then attempts to use a spell to turn his rat yellow. In the movie version, Hermione outclasses Ron by using a spell to fix Harry's glasses. And also Malfoy shows up. In the book, we also get Scabbers biting Goyle's knuckle, and Neville shows up, and Hermione actually shows up twice trying to help Neville look for his toad, and then later on for the spell. And that's really about it. But there's a lot that happens in this scene. For starters, the food they eat establishes a world filled with goods manufactured for magical people by magical people for the various needs they might have. This is a favorite part of the Harry Potter world for a lot of people. All these wacky inventions that wizards have and use to fix their magical problems is very inventive and fun. Here is where we are introduced to chocolate frogs, which are important for plot reasons in the first book, but also introduce a sense of history and culture to the Wizards of Britain. The next time we get something like this was when the Quidditch World Cup happened and we see wizards from all over the world. But here we can see that there is a history of magic, and it isn't just a boring class taught by a ghost. Next comes the characters. This scene is Ron's whole introduction. It is the first time we see Ron and Harry interact truly. We also get a lot about his family through how he talks about them. Both Harry and we, the audience, learn that magic cannot make some problems go away, such as wealth and money. That's one of Gamp's 5 laws, by the way. We are also introduced to Hermione, and although they are not friends by any means, we get a cursory glance at her personality and how she seems to rub Ron in particular the wrong way, and enough that Harry can make his own judgments. We are officially introduced to Malfoy. In the book, he is introduced earlier, but we never get his name, so it doesn't really count for the purposes of storytelling, and I can see why that scene would get cut for a screenplay. But this establishes a rival for Harry, a bit of conflict before he is even set foot in the school. Also, Crabbe and Goyle are there. Neville is introduced for the first time. He is sympathetic, but the emphasis is more on the pathetic part. He comes across as a bit of a hapless, bumbling oaf. Comedic relief in the first few books and movies, but his character growth is arguably the most drastic. On top of that, anyone who is rereading will understand that Neville's story mirrors Harry's. As a character introduction, Neville's is the least memorable, but possibly the most important for the purposes of plot. Although Ron and Hermione interact with Harry more regularly and are integral to Harry's narrative, Neville is far more important to the overarching narrative. The last introduction is the most innocuous. Scabbers serves not only to help establish the Weasley family's financial state, but basically is a setup for a plot twist that won't matter for another 2.5 books. After all the character introductions, we can get to the most important part of the scene, for me, and that is Ron attempting to cast the spell to turn his rat yellow. This single part of the series is genius. No, really. Up until this point, we haven't really seen how magic is done. As both the audience and Harry, we have only seen Hagrid do minimal and subtle magic, and then the small feats of wonder that Harry committed when he was scared or angry. As the reader, we saw Dumbledore use a lighter to magic away the lights, and McGonagall transform from a cat and back, but none of this gives us any indication as to how the magic of the world operates. Harry himself is worrying about not being raised in a wizarding family. He has no idea what magic is. The words that Ron uses in the spell in this scene are utter nonsense. It's just a goofy rhyme.
Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow, turn this stupid fat rat yellow.
I think this is supposed to be like the spells of old from fairy tales that witches use, which is exactly the point. When I was younger, I wondered how magic worked in the books. And then Ron tries out this spell, and the whole thing is just ridiculous. But it doesn't work at all. In the book, we can already glean that Fred and George are pranksters. We can see that they would get a kick out of watching their younger brother waving his wand around spouting nonsense. But for a first-time reader, we see that this nonsense spell doesn't work. The movie then does something super clever, and has Hermione jump in and use a spell to repair Harry's glasses.
Oculus Reparo.
Simple, straightforward, clean, pseudo-Latin phrase. This establishes that old rhymes of fairy tales are not how magic is done in this world. This ain't your grandmother's magic system. Unless your grandmother can do magic, in which case, call me. As a young reader, I liked this very much. The simple spell commands were cool and dynamic. The old Hicketus Picketus was fun, but a bit silly. In Harry Potter, you say what you want and it happens. You command the magic. Later we learn that there are gestures that go along with magic, and in the same scene we learn that enunciating is also important. In the book we get Professor Flitwick saying, "Never forget Wizard Barufio, who said his S instead of an F and found himself on the floor with a buffalo on his chest." But if you prefer the movie version, we can all say it together now.
It's Leviosa, not Leviosa.
The inclusion of a verbal component tells us something about how magic is accomplished as a kind of command. This is when we get to the real nerdy shit. Proposed by philosopher John Austin, following in the works of another guy named Wittgenstein, speech act theory is a way of understanding the power of speech simply by stating or saying something. Kind of like how Rumpelstiltskin had power over something by naming it, Wittgenstein would have a lot of interesting things to say about that. There are 3 steps in speech act theory that Austin outlined. The first is a locutionary act. This is the simple act of stating a sentence that has syntactical and semantical value. Syntactical value refers to a sentence as having a proper grammatical meaning.
Creepy pants all the time get some. Maybe parachute, maybe clown care.
This is certainly a sentence of some kind, but it has no grammatical or syntactical value. On the other hand, a sentence like colorless green ideas sleep furiously has syntactical value, but no semantical value. That sentence makes perfect grammatical sense, but it doesn't refer to anything meaningful and has at least one logical contradiction in it. So any sentence said out loud that makes sense grammatically and refers to something is a locutionary act. This includes all the socialized and normalized meanings of a particular language or culture. The second step, or act, is illocutionary, and it refers to what the intention or implied meaning behind the spoken sentence is, the underlying meaning that is hopefully understood by the uttered statement. I could perform a locutionary act and say, I am closing my door now. Self-explanatory. But the illocutionary act would be the meaning, don't bother me now. The last act has more to do with the listener, and it's called the perlocutionary act. This would be the effect the sentence or act has on a listener if you're trying to persuade them, and how effective that is. I hope you can see where I'm going with this, because the act of introducing a verbal component to a spell really fits nicely into speech act theory. Let's look at the Patronus charm. The words expecto patronum are spoken out loud. This is the locutionary act, which can be interpreted as directly meaning, I await a guardian, in pseudo-Latin. The illocutionary act would be the intention of the spell, to use a happy thought to repel dementors, and the perlocutionary act would be the creation of the Patronus, hopefully a corporeal one if you can pull it off. This is just my way of explaining the power and magic in the Harry Potter universe using philosophy. It's pretty cool, I think. But I hear you hardcore Harry Potter fans out there saying, hey, what about nonverbal spells? Well, I'm so glad you're paying attention. Nonverbal spells are introduced into the curriculum at Hogwarts in 6th year, and the book is quick to point out that they are very difficult. Many witches and wizards don't bother with them because you can get by without them, but they are useful for the element of surprise. I think the reason that they might be difficult is directly because of speech act theory. Imagine trying to convince someone to do something without saying it out loud. You now have to get your meaning, grammar, intention, sentiment, and desires across in the hopes of creating a perlocutionary action without the locutionary or illocutionary act. Yeah, I would call that tricky. Although the speech act theory thing might be just my reading of a philosophical idea overlaid into the Harry Potter universe, I do think that the Hogwarts Express scene is absolutely genius because of the way it sets up how the audience can expect magic to be performed for the rest of the series. And I basically use this scene as an excuse to talk about my ideas. And the nonverbal spells that come later are a subversion of what we've been taught. They're unexpectedly tricky for Harry and for the audience, and they prove to be a difficult feat for Harry to master. You really have to feel it and mean it. This scene is the first time a set of concrete rules for the spells and magic that I enjoy thinking about so much are introduced. On top of that, there are a myriad of character introductions and story building opportunities. And that is why I think this is one of the smartest scenes in Harry Potter. And now for the gushing. I'm pretty sure that I could teach an entire philosophy class just using Harry Potter as the medium and metaphor for the lessons. I honestly cannot wait to reread them again. I'm thinking about rereading them right now. Actually, my favorite book is 3 because it's got time travel and werewolves, followed by 7 because I just think it closes things really, really well. I really wanted Fantastic Beasts to be good because it wasn't an adaptation of any source material, so I had really high hopes. I think the reason I feel so strongly about the films being what they are is because I have such a close connection to the books and their wonderfully crafted world. But the movies really are a spectacular visual exploration and representation of the Harry Potter universe, and the way that they portray magic is just, well, magical. But on the other hand, where the fuck Peeves at? Hey, thanks for watching that video. For all you hardcore fans out there, just know that I'm a Slytherin and we can get 10 points for our house if you click that like button. Feel free to check out some of these other awesome videos like this podcast or other video essays from me, DeJangles the Strange.